Welcome to Ballot Battleground Nevada. I'm your host, Ben Margiott, a reporter at KRNV News 4 in Reno. I'm passionate about making politics in this critical battleground state more digestible to the average voter and pushing past the talking points to press politicians for answers. On this show, we take deep dives into the people, ideas, and debates shaping Silver State politics. Jacky Rosen is back in the U.S. Senate for a second term representing the Silver State after she barely hung on to her seat, narrowly withstanding the red wave in 2024 that put President Trump back in office. Democrats are in the minority in both the Senate and House and are still trying to find out their message and strategy in the second Trump administration. But Senator Rosen, in a recent interview with Time magazine, says they're finding their footing when it comes to pushing back on things like tariffs, deportations, DOGE, and more. This episode, we had the chance to sit down with Senator Rosen for an extended one-on-one conversation on all of that, not to mention her opinion of a new voter ID proposal, the criticism of her Washoe County lands bill, and how her first job as a cocktail waitress on the Vegas Strip informs her work in Congress. Before we dive in, we are supposed to be off this week, and this podcast is not coming out on a Wednesday. But as I said last week, we don't want to wait to bring it to you, given how fast the news cycle is moving right now. Thanks for understanding as we've gotten away from our schedule a little bit this year. We'll get back on it eventually. Okay, enough housekeeping. Here's our interview with Senator Jacky Rosen. And it is a great honor to have U.S. Senator Jacky Rosen from the great state of Nevada joining us on Ballot Battleground Nevada this week. Senator Rosen, thank you so much for being here.
I'm really happy to be here. Happy to be here with you in person. We do so many Zooms every week with the news when I'm in Washington, so it's really great to be here with you. Chair next to you in the chair.
For sure. Yeah, we've done, dozen Zooms probably over the years and many in-person interviews as well. But to have you captive here for the next 20 or so minutes. It's
always better in person too.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. You need no introduction, of course, but just I'll breeze through it before we get to the nitty-gritty here, representing Nevada in the U.S. Senate since 2018 and in the House prior to that. Your first Senate election, you defeated Dean Heller. And then, of course, we all know, reelected last November, very narrowly beating Army Captain Sam Brown. And a fun fact that I learned about you recently, former cocktail waitress on the Las Vegas Strip. Is that correct?
Well, you know what? I put myself through college as a waitress. My parents moved to Nevada in 1975, and I was in college in the Midwest. I grew up in outside Chicago, and so I would come here for the summers. Of course, like every college student, you come back. And the summer I turned 21, I actually I went to the union. I joined the Culinary Union, 226. I went down. Back then, there were no computers. It was 1977, I guess. I turned 78. I turned 21 anyway. And you go down there, and they give you the little jobs, and I worked summer jobs as a cocktail waitress. I worked at Caesar's Palace, and I was all of 21, so there you go. But it paid my tuition, for almost that whole year, that summer job, and I'm forever grateful for that.
Got some good tips, I'm sure. Do we know if you're the only former cocktail waitress in the U.S. Senate, or the first former cocktail waitress?
Maybe Caesar's Palace.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, many folks who are there, they put themselves through school. They worked as a waitress or bartender, or they maybe worked construction. They worked a lot of different things. And people, back in the 70s when I went to college, college wasn't as expensive as it is now, and everybody had a job.
Yeah.
And that was a reason I wanted to be a waitress was, well, you got your cash tips, and you always got a little doggy bag to take home, so you got food too. So it seemed like a win-win, and they were flexible around my class schedule. And it's a really fun story to tell now. And no, there are no pictures because it was the 1970s. There were no one had cell phones, so there were no pictures in casinos then.
Well, that's some cool backstory to kind of leading up to your career. Computer programmer, synagogue president prior to come to the U.S. Senate.
You learn a lot being a waitress. I'll tell you that.
Let's get into the nitty gritty because, of course, there's so much going on. We have to start with the Trump administration's immigration policy because just now there is this incident with Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia. He's the El Salvadoran immigrant mistakenly deported by the Trump administration. He is in prison right now in El Salvador. Like a half an hour before we started, we're recording this on Wednesday evening. You tweeted, the Trump administration must return Kilmar Abrego Garcia from El Salvador. Donald Trump cannot ignore the courts and the law because he doesn't agree with them. I mean, what do you make of just this whole situation overall?
Well, first of all, it's horrific. We have people going with masks and hoods, capturing people on the street, shoving them into vans, and essentially kidnapping them and then sending them to the worst prison in the world. We don't know who they are, why they're being sent. There's no due process. There's no records. And even the Trump administration themselves have said this gentleman, Mr. Garcia, was deported by mistake. But too bad. We're a country of laws. We're a democracy. There's 3 branches of government. Even the Supreme Court, 9-0, said he has to facilitate bringing Mr. Garcia back. He doesn't get to just ignore the laws because he doesn't like them. And it's important that we follow the rule of law because that's really what makes us who we are. We have to stand up. We don't want criminals here. I don't want criminals here. But we do have a system. We do have due process. And we can't just say we're going to build more prisons in foreign countries, pick people up off the street. They can't even call their family. We don't know what's going on, and then they just disappear forever. That's not what we should be doing.
And so what can be done about this? Because as you've put it, the Trump administration right now is ignoring the Supreme Court, this co-equal branch of government that has, in this ruling unanimous decision, they've told the government to return this man to the United States, and authorities in both countries right now not complying with that order from the Supreme Court. I think some people would say that that's kind of a constitutional crisis. I mean, what can be done about this?
Well, I think I know that Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, Mr. Garcia's Maryland resident, he is here legally. I believe that his wife is a citizen. He was, again, by this administration's own admission, sent there by mistake. And so they should be doing everything they can to return this man to his family. Now, I'm not an attorney. I know that attorneys will be looking at what we can do. No one is above the law. The president isn't above the law. The attorney general certainly knows better than to ignore the law and ignore the Supreme Court. So that will be working its way through there. And we have to continue to highlight the situation and highlight what they're doing in these types of deportations, how cruel it is and how unlawful it is. If you just went in the parking lot here and saw masked men throwing someone in a van, what would you think? That's not what we do. It's not following the law. And it's important that we do that no matter what.
President Trump was just caught on microphone saying that he wanted to send homegrown criminals, American citizens, essentially to that prison as well. What's your reaction to that? Do you believe him? Do you take him at his word?
Oh, I take him at his word. Everything he says it first, and then he does it pretty darn quick right after. And that is 100% unconstitutional, period. He cannot take American citizens who he doesn't like, who he may disagree with, put them on a plane, kidnap them, round them up, show me your papers. I don't know what the hell he's going to ask, and send them to another country. And by the way, on the taxpayer's dime, to be forgotten. That, again, is not our democracy, and it is unconstitutional, and we have to stop him before he even thinks about that for a second, because, look, could be you, could be me, could be anybody who disagrees with him. What's to stop him? We've got to find a way to do that.
Let's talk about tariffs, because even though there's been a 90-day pause in the Liberation Day tariffs, the much higher tariffs that were put in place for so many countries around the world, many countries still have that 10% tariff. Before we get into kind of the specifics here, do you support tariffs generally as a way to kind of onshore manufacturing, bring factories and manufacturing back to the United States? Do you support them in some kind of limited space?
Yeah, well, of course, and that's a great question, because tariffs can be used in a surgical, directed way. So let's say, for example, we know that someone is not playing by the rules and overcharging us, or using tariffs against the United States and we want a level playing field. Well, then you would target those particular tariffs and try to use that as a negotiation tool. We do that all the time. We want to bring American manufacturing back. Well, we did that with the Chips and Science Acts when we started investing in American companies and American innovation. We can see right here at UNR, we've become the lithium loop. That was really important. So we've been doing that, and there's ways to continue bringing manufacturing here. But just tariffs across the board without thinking about it, even putting tariffs on places where there are no people, only penguins, it just shows you they weren't paying attention. And I just want to add one thing. There's some countries, let's talk about food, some of the food we love to eat or drink. Coffee. Coffee is grown only in certain parts of the country. We're not going to be growing coffee in Alaska or probably the continental United States. They grow some great coffee in Hawaii, right? So we may have with some countries a trade imbalance in coffee because we just can't bring coffee here, or maybe we're not going to grow some kinds of fruits or vegetables or whatever those things are. And those are okay, right? So you have to really look at it at a very specific way, and what Trump's doing isn't that. Just say 10% across the board, and then one day it's 100% on this, another day they're off, one day they're on, there's no certainty. Businesses are calling me every day. I was just Southern Nevada. I've been visiting a lot of small businesses. They don't know how they're going to weather the storm, especially at some small restaurants, family-owned restaurants and bakeries. They import a lot of food, right? Avocados, this, that, the other, all the things we like to eat. They don't know if they're going to be able to weather the storm. They employ 30, 40, 50 people at these restaurants and bakeries. What will they do? They're not going to make it a year or two. Big companies, maybe they'll be fine, but it's really hurting our small business owners.
Do you think that Congress should have to sign off on or vote to approve these tariffs before they go into effect?
Well, Congress is supposed to deal with finances, with the money, right? I can tell you just in the last few weeks, the tariffs the President put on Canada, we actually put a resolution on the floor in the Senate that Republicans joined us to repeal the unfair tariffs on Canada. Canada, one of our biggest trading partners, a good friend. Canada's not our enemy. Come on. And so we had quite a few Republicans, I think 4 Republicans join us on that to pull that back. And I think as you're going to see more and more of these things, you'll see Republicans crossing the aisle to take back our power in the Congress and try to right the ship a little bit.
What would your message be to Republicans that right now are okay with President Trump having that final authority on tariffs, and even Representative Mark Amodei, who we interviewed just last week, seemed to not want to have that authority to approve or disapprove of tariffs?
Well, I can tell you we have 3 co-equal branches of government clearly laid out in the Constitution. Congress is Article 1, so there are specific duties and powers, some appropriation or authorizations, all the money bills start in the House of Representatives, certain things we do in the Senate. We approve the nominees, the judges, the ambassadors, all of those things. They're clearly laid out. And so what we should be doing is taking our congressional power back to appropriate the funds and we work with an administration on what's right. Administration does have leeway to do things, but this is hurting all of us. It's hurting every single one of our states. And I want to tell you what else it's hurting here in Nevada. What's the number 1 industry for us? Tourism. Well, when people are unsure about what they're going to make, about their business, around the world even, do you think they're going to come on a Las Vegas, Lake Tahoe, visit Great Basin and Range, anywhere? They're not going to go on vacation. We're going to get a double whammy. And it's going to hurt Nevada in ways I don't think people imagine yet.
Yeah, I think I've seen a story from the Nevada Independent that tourism from Canada has already
70%
decreased quite a bit.
Down 70% year after year.
Staggering.
Yeah.
Do you support in kind of, I know generally you are opposed to a lot of the cuts from the Department of Government Efficiency, the layoffs of all these federal workers, and the cuts that have affected Nevada, but do you support that effort in some sense to root out waste, fraud, and abuse? Do you think that they've done that to a certain extent?
Of course I do, and that's why we have inspector generals. That's why we need to have transparency, and that's why we need to have analysis. So let's think about this. We have inspector generals, or we can go through and look at programs, decide that if they're still working, can they be merged with others? Could we be spending the money in a better way? Have they outlived their purpose? These are the kinds of things that you analyze, and then you make a decision. And I'm going to bring this home to maybe somebody's home budget or maybe a small business. You don't just say, let's close our entire business, and then we'll see what people miss, and then we'll open the doors and just sell that or just do that. No, you figure out how you can cut corners, you analyze, and then you do it, just like the tariffs, in a directed way. So I want to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. I want to be sure that we take care of things. But I'll tell you this, 85% of the federal workforce works outside of Washington. People working here in Nevada. We have people here work for the veterans, Social Security, USDA, work on behalf of our farmers and ranchers, the BLM. They help protect us with the wildfires. All of these things. It's really important that we look at these jobs and don't just say, well, they don't look like they matter. Well, they matter to our farmers. They matter to the cattle ranchers. Matter to the forest. They matter to Lake Tahoe when we have BLM reclamation, all the folks that work, being sure that everything is safe, and just taking that flamethrower, that chainsaw through. It's just not what smart people do.
Have you heard of any cuts recently within the last few days? I mean, I'm sure your office is monitoring kind of the ways that this is going to affect Nevada. What are maybe some ways that we haven't thought of or reported on yet?
Well, I've been getting about 15,000 contacts a week to my office, mostly emails, but phone calls, letters. In fact, I'm going to start sharing a lot of them with folks. You have a podcast, but trying to share what people are worried about, what they're anxious about. And I'll tell you, one of the top things people are worried about is they're cutting funding to the Veterans Crisis Hotline. The Veterans Crisis Hotline. Now, we have over 250,000 veterans in Nevada. They deserve and need these services. And I have many of our veterans organizations calling me in tears, how will I help people? We do have an issue with veterans' mental health, with veterans' suicide. So cutting those workers at the VA, like that, 80,000 workers, we're trying to build a new VA hospital here in Reno. They're picking the land. I think it's going to be around UNR. We're supposed to be starting ground on it. I got the President Biden to approve it and fund it. We need those workers. You can't just fire the nurses and the doctors and the mental health care workers. It's going to hurt our veterans. So that's just one case of what's going on. Now, maybe we can use computer power and IT modernization dashboards. Maybe we can do things better in that way when we answer calls. But I'm not going to get rid of that mental health counselor that our veterans need.
Speaking of cost cutting, the United States Postal Service last year proposed the cost-cutting measure of, rerouting our Northern Nevada mail through Sacramento. You were very, very involved in that issue, and ultimately the USPS decided not to go through with that under the Biden administration. Have you heard anything about whether or not that plan could be revived, as the USPS and so many other federal agencies are trying to cut costs?
Well, Postmaster DeJoy, I don't have to tell anyone, probably most of your listeners, he had a real disdain for Nevada, and
couldn't say the
he
name.
Couldn't even say the name
Nevada
right.
properly,
and
famously.
Yes, and he didn't think about that our mail that was staying in Nevada would go over the Donner Pass to Sacramento. He literally didn't care what happened. Well, he's since resigned, I think in the last few weeks,
recently,
if I'm not mistaken. But we did get him to stop that plan. I do believe that the post office is going to be putting out some other guidance of what they're going to do. We're going to wait to see. I believe there might be a new postmaster nominee. We'll see who that is. We'll see where they came from, what they do. But I can tell you this, I'm going to fight for our Postal Service here in Reno, Southern Nevada, all across Nevada, and across our country. And for people who don't know, the post office is actually in the Constitution. The framers thought it was so important. And I'm sure you know this too. The mail is really important to people, not just the bills you get, but we now get so many other things from there. We love our packages. We get our medication, all kinds of things. And who doesn't like to get that those nice cards? And it's so, I oftentimes love it when you get the real card in the mail from someone. Like, what a treat to have that. Can you imagine a life without the mail?
Yeah, absolutely. I was
Right.
at the post office this morning picking up a package. So
And there you
absolutely.
go.
Vital service for sure.
That's right.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
The House recently passed the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, the SAVE Act. It would require voters to show proof of U.S. citizenship in person when registering to vote or updating their voter registration. So for most people, that would be their passport or birth certificate. You wouldn't be able to use your driver's license to verify your status anymore. Last I saw that you hadn't said one way or the other, do you support this bill or not?
Well, let me tell you, we were waiting to see what did get passed out of the House because sometimes there's amendments, things change it. So you don't want to jump the gun because you want to see the actual text. Well, I'm going to start with the first thing that this bill will do is disenfranchise married women across this country. Well, I've been married 32 years. You say, what does that mean, disenfranchise women? Now, my birth certificate name is not the same name as all of my other identification because I took my husband's name. What does that mean? I'd have to go. Well, of course, people have their birth certificate. Fine. I got married in Nevada, so it's easy for me to get this marriage certificate. But I'd have to pay for it, get it mailed to me, go down and show all of that in person. Not so easy for people to do that. If people would have got married in another state, now you have to call there, write there, get it done, go to the post office. We don't want to disenfranchise married women, and that's just one of the consequences of this bill. So although it's important that people, eligible voters are the ones that vote. We haven't seen widespread fraud, particularly here in Nevada. We've had good, fair elections. We've seen that over and over again under both Democrat and Republican secretaries of state. But disenfranchising the millions of married women across this country are just making it harder, another obstacle. You could do it, but aren't we busy enough? Don't we have enough to do?
So take that to mean, of course, you're a no on the SAVE Act.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. And as we wrap up here, I know we're running out of time, but quickly, your Truckee Meadows Public Lands Management Act has been reintroduced, right? It would free up tens of thousands of acres of federal land in Washoe County for economic development and then set aside far more land for conservation and protection. We had Representative Mark Amodei on last week, and he was critical of the bill, saying that the ratio of conservation land to economic development land was too high. And for people who missed that episode, he said your bill was an 80-to-1 ratio, and the NAS Fallon bill, for example, was 8-to-1. Amodei has a different lands bill that's about 4-to-1, and he seemed to say that there's zero chance that this bill with that type of ratio is going to get through the Congress. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that Congressman Amodei and I can work together and talk about it. And so when you think about these ratios, what you really have to think about is this. Different areas have, in Nevada, just different needs. So I introduced a Washoe County lands bill. Now, Washoe County is going to look very different. We have to have economic development, homes, roads, schools, bridges, parks, churches, all of those things, right? Some land, tribal lands, sacred land, we're going to put that aside, conservation land, public lands. So that ratio will be different because it's a more dense urban area. When you have the Truckee Meadows, and you have to look at each parcel in a different way. We have the Persian County lands bill, only 7,000 people live in Persian County, pretty big county, and that lands bill is going to look different. So just going by what the ratio is, I don't think that you're comparing apples to apples when you do that. So I'm going to speak with Congressman Amodei. We're going to talk about what we need to conserve and how we use that. We know in Douglas County, which is, of course, another lands bill, Senator Cortez Masto is leading that. A lot of that bill's for flood control because now we've had the wildfires. When it rains, it causes a lot of runoff and mud and different things. So that may have a higher amount of land that's going to be used for flood control, not for development, because they have a very specific need. You have to look at each one individually. I'll be working with Congressman Amodei to try to find some compromise, because we know that we need these bills for economic development, to protect sacred lands, conserve and preserve the things that we need to, and we should be able to come to consensus.
I know you've been trying to get that package through the Congress for a couple of years now. I mean, what's your case as we wrap up here to, the Trump administration, House Republicans, Senate Republicans, to get this through, because it's been stalled for a few years?
Well, I want to tell you my Washoe County lands bill, in case you didn't see it at the end of last session. I went to the floor of the Senate and asked for unanimous consent to pass my Washoe County lands bill, endorsed by the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce. We worked with all the stakeholders, mayors, developers, wilderness, conservationists, community, everybody. Good consensus bill. I go to the floor solely for Nevada, right? Solely for Nevada. Nobody else's business. Nobody else should care. It's just for us. I go to ask for it to pass, and Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming stands up and objects and says he doesn't want Nevada to get its land back. Well, he wants to do something in Wyoming. Let him go do lands bills in Wyoming or whatever he needs to for his state. He has no business putting his nose in our state, especially when this was a good consensus bill, years in the making. Now we have two different chairs. We have Mike Lee and Martin Heinrich. We're going to continue to work on that, because we have to have these bills in order to move forward. 90% of Nevada was given to the federal government when we became a state in 1864. Since then, we've only gotten about 5 or 6% back. So in about 85% of our state is federal land. We need it to grow, and we need it to take care of ourselves. And I don't want to let someone from another state say, I don't like Nevada, so we're not going to let your bill go through. So shame on those Republicans who did that from other places. And I'm going to continue to work to fight to get it through with some new members.
All right, we will continue to follow that very closely and hope to have you back, by the way, sometime later this year, because there's so much more that we could talk about. It's been a pleasure getting to chat with you, Senator Rosen, to catch up and to press you on a number of issues in the news. Thank you so much for making the time. We really appreciate it.
And thank you for having me. It is wonderful to see you in person. And when I'm in D.C., I'm happy to see you on the Zoom like we've been doing every couple of weeks.
Yep, see you then.
Thanks.
A special thank you to Senator Rosen for making the time during her Northern Nevada trip to chat with us. We will be back again next week with a podcast updating you on how the 83rd legislative session is going down in Carson City. If you made it to the end of this episode, I really appreciate it. If you have guest ideas, episode ideas, questions, comments, compliments, concerns, anything at all, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. My email is bjmargiott, Margiott, at sbgtv.com, and put Ballot Battleground Nevada in the subject line. And if you have a minute, I'd really appreciate it if you left a rating and a review. That helps the podcast show up higher in searches so more people can discover the show. Thanks for listening.